PRovoke podcast is brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialists Marketeers. Support for this podcast comes from Notified, the integrated, intelligent and easy-to-use PR software. Get a free demo today at notified.com.
Welcome to the PRovoke Media podcast. On today's episode, we have the co-founder of Precision Strategies, Stephanie Cutter. So Precision is a digitally forward public affairs shop whose founders helped elect and re-elect President Barack Obama. And our guest today, Stephanie, has also worked with our newly elected President Joe Biden. She was one of the producers of the socially distanced inauguration on January 20th and the virtual Democratic National Convention that was held last fall. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me.
So, Stephanie, you have such an impressive career in politics that I'm sure I didn't do it justice just now in my brief introduction. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background?
Sure. So I spent many years in Democratic politics from way back, even just growing up. My grandfather was very involved, so we were always around it. Out of college, I worked for Mario Cuomo, who was then the governor of New York, who was thinking about running for president. And I joined as somebody answering the phones and worked my way up to do speech writing and policy and things like that. And it was a formative experience for me. And I was a big fan of Mario Cuomo's. And from there, when Governor Cuomo decided not to run, I left and joined then Governor Clinton's campaign. Ended up working in the White House, going to law school at night at the White House, and just stuck with it. Thought I was going to be a lawyer, maybe a prosecutor, but I could never really just extricate myself from the world of politics or government. And I've worked for lots of people, Ted Kennedy, who was probably my greatest mentor, Harry Reid, when he was majority leader of the Senate, Barack Obama, when he was a candidate, and then when he was president, both in the White House and for his reelection campaign. After President Obama was reelected in 2013, I started Precision with two colleagues from the campaign, Jen O'Malley Dillon, who now is in the White House with President Biden. She was his campaign manager, and Teddy Goff, my other partner. And the goal was to build an integrated agency because presidential campaigns only work if they are completely integrated. And what I mean by that is if you're launching a TV ad, your message online, your message on the ground, your message door to door, all has to be aligned and very targeted, built for the audience you're trying to reach. And the audience you're trying to reach is not monolithic on a presidential campaign. And you really need to understand how to communicate with specific targets. And it takes all of the tools in the toolbox to get that done, and it has to be seamless and integrated. So at that point, nobody was really doing that in the private sector. So we built Precision to do very high-level targeted campaigns for sports teams, sports leagues, corporations, advocacy campaigns, nonprofits. Our clients are very, very diverse. But we've always kept one toe, I'd say, not even a whole foot, but one toe in politics, because that's our bread and butter. And that's truly where you learn sort of how to, break things and make them better. And in this case, for both the virtual convention and the virtual inauguration, that was true. I think we set a standard for how to do storytelling through virtual events for every other sector. So we've, kept our toe in politics, the Biden campaign, Hillary, we do lots of Senate work and gubernatorial work.
Well, let's look specifically then, because of course, you sounds like, you built quite a career on sort of integrating different components of a campaign. But of course, much of that was thrown into the air over the last 12 months with the pandemic. So, I will say, having reviewed hundreds of PR award submissions from 2020, a common theme was, we had to pivot our live event to online, but no pivot, I'm sure, was as complex as adjusting the DNC and the inauguration for the, the reality of the pandemic. Can you take us back to the early days with the DNC, perhaps, and the conversations that you were having, as the world was shutting down last spring, and thinking about what it would look like, and what were the considerations, what were the top considerations that you took into account?
Sorry, I was dealing with a little virtual learning over here. What were the top considerations in planning for the convention?
Yeah, so, as the world was shutting down, I mean, even maybe as early as March, were you all looking out and saying, look, there's no way we're going to be able to get hundreds of people into a convention center?
I don't think anybody really understood in March how long this was going to go. In maybe April, we moved the date back from the end of July to the end of August, thinking that would buy us some time. And then it was pretty clear by May that the situation was not going to go away anytime soon, and that the pandemic was with us for a while. So we knew we had to make some significant changes, but that was an iterative process. And at first we thought, well, we'll do a hybrid. We'll bring the delegates to Wisconsin, but for everybody else, normally at a political convention, there's lots of fundraisers, there's lots of activists, there's organizers, there's candidates looking to get their name out there. There's, tens of thousands of people that come. And we knew when we wouldn't be able to do that, but we thought maybe we could bring the delegates. And that about a month later, it was quickly determined that we couldn't even bring the delegates. It was too much of a risk. And honestly, then Vice President Biden, the candidate, about to be the Democratic nominee, was running his campaign with the strictest protocols because he felt like he needed to be a role model for everybody else across the country. And so there was no room for any risk in that regard. So we quickly started doing research of what does a virtual convention look like? And if we are going virtual, then can we throw out the rule book? What do we need to keep? And what can we completely reimagine? And so the things that, people think of in a political convention, they think of the keynote speech. They think of the roll call, which is always a big seller. And they think of the nominee's speech. So those are three things we can plan the week around, but we need a lot more content. And how do we keep people's attention? Because normally political conventions are not that interesting. And it's, one speech after another, and nobody pays attention. And doing that online can be, I couldn't imagine anybody staying online and not just slamming down their computer or shutting off their TV. So how do we make that more engaging and more interesting? First, we made a decision to shrink the time. Normally it's 5 to 6 hours a day of programming. We shrunk that to 2 hours a day. And we also realized that for any political speech, it couldn't really be longer than 5 minutes max. And the average time that we settled on for these speeches, with the exception of the big anchor speeches, which would be the vice president, the vice presidential nominee, Senator Harris, President Obama, Michelle Obama, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, the average time for a speech was about 2 minutes. And it took a long time for really the political electeds to get their head around that. And, at first they thought they were being slighted. We're like, no, trust us. This is what you want. You don't want people tuning out. And because of the brevity of those speeches, they were that much better. They cut right to the chase. And kept people's interest. We also realized that we needed to shake up the content. It couldn't be speech after speech after speech. So, there had to be some surprises, and whether it was a performance or a different type of program, and not just, a direct to camera speech. So we mixed it up. We ensured that every night over the course of those 2 hours, we were telling a consistent story. And with each speaker telling a piece of it or providing a proof point of it, and every performance or segment was connected up to that storyline. So that's what we did. Nobody could really get their heads around what it would be, because in terms of delegates or people that were going to be watching, they thought it would be a constant Zoom call, which we had all been on lots of. But it was much different than that. And I think we took people by surprise.
Yes. And I think that you mentioned the virtual roll call. And of course, that was a big hit from this year. And I will say, not only, my 5-year-old had watched the DNC with us, and you kept his attention. So
oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. He still calls it the Joe Biden show.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
I probably should turn it on for my 6-year-old right now. But the roll call was fun. And we felt, in doing that, everybody has been quarantined in their houses at that point. It was a way for people to see America and get out of their houses and to be entertained. So nobody will forget the calamari on the Rhode Island.
Yes. That was like all week, right? That was like what everybody was tweeting about. So let's go to the inauguration for a minute. Of course, not only was it complicated by the pandemic, but of course the January 6th attack on the Capitol. So after the insurrection, there were calls that, people were saying, move everything indoors for safety reasons. How did you balance, the symbolic value of, seeing, the president being sworn in, and safety and some of these other considerations, not only safety against the pandemic, but also safety against, any potential terrorism?
Well, we were all shocked by what happened on January 6th. And, I remember actually sitting right here because we had to plan everything virtually. And I was running a production call, and I had CNN on, and CNN was reporting that the insurrectionists had just breached the Capitol. And I said that out loud on the call, and we had like maybe 10 to 20 seconds of silence, like, wow. And what does this mean for an inauguration that was taking place 2 weeks later? Exactly 2 weeks later. We quickly moved into gear. The planning for the inaugural acceptance, the inaugural ceremony, it was very much a partnership with Congress. And they weren't going to take any risk. And after just having been through that. And so whenever there is a presidential nominee or a president involved, the Secret Service takes over. And it was deemed a national security event, which means a lot of resources are brought to bear on protecting participants. And because of what happened on January 6th, they moved up the start date for deeming it a national security event much earlier, so that the city was basically locked down. And we determined we already had a very light footprint because of the pandemic for our other events. And so we didn't, in terms of the physicality of what we were doing, we didn't have to make any changes. In terms of making people feeling comfortable, traveling to Washington to sing the anthem or another performance at the inaugural ceremony, or coming to participate in the Celebrating America program on inaugural night, we had to, we worked very hard in strengthening security around that, but also making people feel comfortable, which meant a lot of security briefings and helping them understand the protocol. But in addition to the talent, we had hundreds of people working on these shows, and many of them traveling to DC. We had our production studio set up at a hotel downtown. We never told anybody where it was. And we needed to work to make sure that the people traveling to DC to produce this thing also felt comfortable. So, long story short, we didn't make any changes with the program. There was a lot of behind the scenes work to ensure that we had everything locked up and that everybody felt comfortable participating.
I mean, you referenced the evening event, the Celebrating America, kind of the inauguration ball. That was so well received. I mean, in these beautiful visuals of, John Legend playing the grand piano and the backdrop of Lincoln Memorial, or Katy Perry kicking off this stunning display of fireworks, probably ever televised. I mean, and of course, cutting between these live and pre-taped segments. I mean, and then we also talked about the virtual, the roll call at the DNC. I mean, do you think that this is the future? Are we moving towards at least a hybrid of sort of, online style segments with sort of the conventional kind of traditional inaugurations?
I think it's too soon to say. And ultimately, it is up to, 4 years from now, it'll be up to President Biden. 4 years after that, it would be up to Vice President Harris.
Predictions made live here.
But I have to say there are elements of what we did that I think will be carried forward. And ultimately, it was allowing more people to participate. You didn't need an inaugural ticket to participate. You didn't need to pay a lot of money to go to a ball. We brought it to you, and we pulled in you and your community into it. Same for the convention. You didn't need a credential to participate. We had lots of, hundreds of crowdsourced videos of people talking about different things that we wove through the convention to pull people in. We had a technology where you could be watching whether it's the inaugural or the convention, and you would be reacting to what you're seeing on screen, and all of a sudden you are on screen. And that was all, obviously the technology is not organic, but the reactions were all organic, and it allowed people a way to participate. So we sort of democratized these two events. And also because it was virtual, we were very, excuse me, I will, honey, when I'm done. I'm almost done. Sorry.
No, I've been there.
Virtual learning.
Yes. My son's upstairs doing his stuff.
We were able, because it was virtual, we could be much more disciplined in the messaging.
Right.
And it was really important to sort of meet the country where it was at that point, which made storytelling all that much more important. And normally in an inaugural or a convention, the storytelling, you just don't have a discussion about that. That's not what the purpose of those events are.
Right.
But because of the change in format and our need to meet the country where it was, they had just gone through a very traumatic time, whether it was the pandemic or watching the Capitol be breached, or depending upon your politics, how you felt, during the Trump presidency. And we needed to address that. And really, if you look at our messaging around the inaugural, it was, of course, an inauguration is the celebration of a new president. But staying true to who Joe Biden is and the messaging that he won the election on, it was really about celebrating the American people and the strength and perseverance of the American people, and making them feel like they had a stake in this, but that, yes, we've gone through a very tough time, but there are things happening across our society, like the heroes that we've lifted up through Celebrating America or the virtual parade, who are in the midst of a pandemic, going above and beyond. And they are really representative of what is happening in these communities where the American people are coming together to help each other. And, lifting up those storylines, connecting those storylines to a performance. There was much more connective tissue in these virtual events than you normally get in a inaugural or a convention. And I think that methodology will stick with it.
Right. And I Stephanie, I know you have to run, but I wanted to get one more question in, and that's, how did you factor in things like Twitter in your planning of the inauguration? I mean, for me, I remember watching, Barack Obama's 2009 inauguration with my eyes glued on the TV, but with President Biden, I scrolled, and it was, within my phone was popping with IMs and DMs and people saying, have you seen this? Or, have you looked at this yet? So, when President Obama was elected or inaugurated, I don't even remember if I had an iPhone yet. So, how did you factor that?
Coming out.
Yeah, right. Like exactly. So how did you factor that into the planning and people's engagement with social media?
Social media, for us, it was a way to tease out and build excitement for people to tune in. And we had lots of different ways that people could watch. Obviously, the networks covered it, which was tremendous. But we also had our own virtual feed. We also worked with Amazon Prime, and on every social media platform, we had our feed. So it was driving, in advance of the inaugural, it was teasing out segments and content and building excitement and momentum for people to tune in however they wanted to tune in. Throughout the events, it allowed us to make that content last longer. It wasn't just a moment in time. It was a moment in time that you could come back to through social media. And it was a way to generate conversation and engagement around what we were producing. And then, the last thing I will say is, for all of the talent that we had participating in these events, they were our best evangelists for not only getting people to tune in, but distributing content. So this content will continue to be distributed for who knows how long, in perpetuity, I guess, and that the talent had a big role in doing that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So speaking of talent, I have to ask you one, it's yes or no question. Did you know that Amanda Gorman would be the breakout star from the inauguration?
I knew she was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
If you watch any of her other YouTube performances, she's an incredible young woman. Mm-hmm. And when I read the draft of her poem, I just was so taken with it. And she met the moment. And for someone, she is a young woman. I just don't remember being that sophisticated or introspective at that age, but she's an incredible woman.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for your time today. And thank you for so much of your insight. And we'd love to, there are so many questions that I didn't even get a chance to get to. But
I know, I'm sorry.
This is a good, no worries. My husband's upstairs with my son, getting him set up for kindergarten as well. So I completely understand, but it's a good reason to have you back on the show one day.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
I hope so.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners. And we'll be back with another episode soon.
You have been listening to the PRovoke podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialists Marketeers. Support for this podcast comes from Notified, the integrated, intelligent and easy-to-use PR software. Get a free demo today at notified.com.